So in the past couple of months, I've had a bunch of people reach out to me about their own experiences with burnout in tech, and in a lot of cases, outside of tech. And of course, like I feel for all of these people. And I never thought that a video I made about burnout would impact so many people. I think I just wanted to put my own experiences online with the hope that it would reach the right person who needed to hear the right words. But in the past couple of months, I've been doing much, much, much better. And I wanted to share some of my own experiences and my own learnings with the hope that it can again reach the right people who need to hear this. Because I think this whole thing about burning out or reaching a rut in your career is something that's pretty common from what I've seen and happens to people when they're about 5 to 7 years into their professional career and, where they're just like searching for a deeper meaning or something. But today I'll talk about everything, and I'll talk about my own experience in recovering from this whole process, and hopefully you can take something away from it. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was the fact that it's important to listen to your feelings. Even if you think that whatever you're feeling is invalid or inconsequential. Now, I want to give a strong asterisk to this section, but I'm going to move it to the end of the video because I don't think it quite fits in the scope of this section. Click on the timestamps or whatever to skip ahead if you want. But I think as software engineers or in other careers where we might be doing pretty well for ourselves, there's this sense of your problems don't matter. I would tell myself this all the time, where it's like, if I'm struggling, just suck it up and get through it because everyone else is getting through it. But just because your problems are unrelatable to someone out there doesn't mean that you should ignore them for yourself. Because at the end of the day, you're the only person that is going to take care of yourself. There are times in your career where it's important to push yourself because that's the only way we grow. That's the only way we learn how to code. That's the only way we learn how to become seasoned engineers to get our jobs, was by pushing ourselves and growing past what we think we can be. But then there are points where you push and you push and you push and you reach a wall in your life, like a point of no return in your brain. I think I reached this a number of times in my own burnout experience, but during those times, there was always a sense of like, just suck it up and get through it. Like there's so many people trying to claw their way into tech. There's so many people that are not doing as well as me. Like there's nothing for me to complain about. But over time, I think this repression of feelings really started to eat away at me from the inside. Everyone has problems. I think it's almost in human nature to basically solve your problems and then create a new one. We're always looking towards a new problem to solve as humans. We can go down the line. We can go down every single step, and our jobs, whatever we're doing, each person down the line will look up and say that this person above us, all their problems don't matter. All their problems are completely invalid compared to my own. But that doesn't mean you should ignore it. In my career, I've had a couple of times in my life where I've kind of hit that wall where I just feel like, man, I don't know how I'm going to get through the next day, the next week. And a lot of times, especially like when I was younger, I was able to push through a lot of these experiences because, you have more energy, you have more stamina and stuff, and you're more willing to push through things. But over time, I think as years and years and years go by, it becomes a little bit more difficult. And I think it's important that when we're boiling over, when we have all these feelings, when we're just trying to push through every single day, to figure out what it is we're going to do about it. I think for me, in a lot of those times when I hit those walls, changing my lifestyle by itself was enough to fix these problems. A lot of times I would do different things. Like I would try to eat healthier. I would try to work from different spaces. I would try to work from coffee shops. I would try to bring new things in my life that I was more excited about to enrich my life and stuff like that. I was always kind of in problem solving mode when it came to these things. And at the end of the day, I finally decided that it was more important for me to take a break from software than to just keep pushing for a while. But everyone's going to have their own experiences, and everyone's going to have their own way that they get through their problems. You just have to find that for yourself and recognize the signs when you're about to implode as a person. The next thing I wanted to talk about in terms of my own software burnout, I guess, and my software recovery was this idea of comparing yourself to others all the time. And this comes in two parts. The first part, I think in my career, was comparing myself to people who just seem extremely happy with whatever they're doing. I worked at 4 jobs, and there was always people like that. There was always people that looked like they loved every single day of their life. They loved coming to work. They loved doing what they did. They loved leading projects. They loved designing things. They loved creating things. And I think a lot of those times I would kind of sit back and be like, why can't I be like that person? This person is so happy. I just have to be exactly like them. But over time, I've realized in my own reflection in these past few months that everyone has their own things that really flip a switch in their head. One person who loves coming to work, working on software documentation, coding, all that stuff, might absolutely hate it. One person who loves sitting in meetings for 8 hours a day and talking to people and just like being around people, and you give that job to someone else and they'll fucking hate it. The idea is that I could never compare my happiness to someone else, and trying to do that, trying to fit myself into the mold of someone who I perceived as happy, it was doing the opposite for me. And also, I think it's really hard to read people sometimes. Sometimes people who appear the happiest on the outside are definitely not on the inside. They're just good at faking it. And the next part about this comparison and my understandings of it and my thoughts about it was how I would compare myself to other people's performance on my team and in my jobs and everything. Because this happens at every job. This happens in school. This happens growing up and stuff. You do your job, but there's always someone doing better than you. There's always someone scoring higher on a test. There's always someone who's just better than you are. And I think a lot of times in my career, I would try to compare, and I would be like, I need to be like that person. Like, how do I be them? In a lot of ways, what is the point? I think some people, it really energizes them to try and be the best. I know a lot of people in my career that their main goal is to be the best. And whatever someone else is doing, they will learn everything from them and try to be better than them, to try to like one up them and stuff. But for me, I think I was never quite like that. I would take things that would improve my workflow, that would make me a better engineer, but I was never interested in being the best, in getting promoted and all that shit. And I think this mental pull from both sides in my brain caused me to really stress out a lot of times in my career. So I wanted to give some takeaways from both of these things. One thing I learned in my reflections in the past month is that people love their jobs for different reasons. You don't have to compare yourself to someone who absolutely loves their job, because people want different things. And what you want for yourself, you can only figure it out for yourself over time. And again, honestly, some people might not love their job as much as you outwardly can see that they love it. And the second thing is that, I think as humans, comparing ourselves to others is normal. And it's in our best interest to really temper that, to really figure out how to alleviate that in our heads and try to reduce that stress. I'm going to be completely honest. I never really figured out the best way to deal with this. And this is probably going to be an ongoing struggle for me for a long time, because for me, I think it's just always kind of natural to be like, wow, that guy is so good at their job. Why can't I be as good as them? So it's an ongoing experience, but I know at least now that it causes me stress. And I think that is the first step towards figuring out the best solution for myself. The third thing I wanted to talk about, which is something I actually mentioned a little bit earlier, which is the concept of pushing yourself versus breaking yourself. We all have our breaking points. So I'll start with a little random story. This was about in the beginning of 2022. It's probably a couple months into me starting to create YouTube videos. And it was just a sense of me wanting to do something outside of work that I thought was fun, that I thought could help people, and just to relieve the day-to-day monotony of my life. And then one day, like early 2022, my dad, of all people, came to me, or he visited me or something. And then he told me that he found my YouTube videos. And then he was like really excited about it. He was talking about it. And I mean, it was just a very wholesome experience. But he did tell me one thing. He told me, don't tire yourself out too much. You're doing a lot. You're working, you're like trying to do all this YouTube stuff, and it sounds like you're not really giving yourself any time for relaxation. And I think as with a lot of things when our parents tell us things, we kind of ignore it a little bit. I remember when he told me that, I got a little bit upset. I was like, all right, whatever. I mean, I can figure it out. Like, I have energy and I love doing this. But he was absolutely right. Definitely pushing myself on all fronts eventually made me reach my breaking point. Another experience of our parents being right about things. I think it's hard for us individually to see before we reach our own breaking points. But once we reach it, it feels like the world is kind of collapsing on us. And I think for me, every time I reach one of these breaking points, I mentioned it earlier, I just tried to do something to give myself more energy. So what are the things we can do to give ourselves more energy? Well, like I work out. I guess that's not enough. So I started doing more cardio. And then I started waking up earlier and sleeping on time. And that wasn't working. I started to eat better. More vegetables, more protein, all that kind of stuff. I started to plan out my days and like schedule exactly when I'm going to do certain things to make sure that I'm always focused. And I tried to work in like Pomodoro cycles where I would basically work for 25 minutes and take 5-minute breaks, which I thought was enough to keep me energized. But each one of these things, they helped for a little bit, but I kind of realized I just really was pushing way too hard. And I was kind of like reaching a breaking point. And this kind of happened, across a lot of things. This happened when I was doing content. This happened when I was, working at my job where I would try to like work really late to get features out because I wanted to impress someone. And then the thing about our breaking point is that as we push, we never feel ourselves reaching the breaking point. Before we reach the breaking point, I think our life is great. We're always like, yeah, I'm like getting shit done. I'm moving forward. I'm becoming such a better person. And then one day we pass that breaking point and then everything falls apart. Like lately, I've been keeping a calendar where for pretty much the past 8 months, I've been keeping track exactly what I work on every single day. But I've also used this as kind of a mood tracker. So I can see exactly which days I'm productive and which days I'm not. And if I'm not productive, why I wasn't productive that day. So if I pull it up, you can see that, okay, there were certain days where I really didn't get that much done. And then you look into why. Oh, okay, well, I had some sort of breakdown that day, or I had some sort of issue that I was dealing with. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of stuff that happens when you push too hard. So I've learned to try and figure out when those signs are for me to pull back and to really kind of rest for a little bit. And there's another thing about this whole thing, which is how, a lot of people in the older generation like to talk about how the younger generation is like lazy and stuff like that. And, maybe there's a shred of truth to it, but I don't know. I think a lot of people that I know, and I include myself in that, we all work very, very hard at what we do, but, we have our limits. And I don't know, in a lot of ways, the modern day era, it's difficult for everyone. The prices of everything are going up. The prices for housing are going up, and our salaries are not going up to match that. So it can give us kind of a disconnect between our work and our real meaning for life. So kind of ignore what other people say who are talking about people being lazy or whatnot, or younger generations being lazy or whatnot. It doesn't really matter. All that matters is, do you feel like you're a hard worker? And if you are, then block out the noise. Okay, anyway, I talked a lot about the breaking point. And for me, I've learned now over time when to recognize my breaking points. There are certain days, where you start the day and you're massively amped to do everything. And then there are certain days where you're kind of like, I don't really want to do anything. I guess I'll force myself to do things. I think having bad days and a bad couple of days and maybe even a bad week is totally normal. Those are times when I think pushing yourself is good. Push yourself through those bad weeks and try to get through it, and you'll come out a stronger person at the end. But then there are times where you have a bad day, you have another bad day, you have a week's worth of bad days, and then you have a month's worth of bad days. If you keep pushing yourself, if you keep doing the exact same thing in that state, you've already reached your breaking point. At that point, it's basically more a matter of time before you're going to completely implode as a person. And for me, It's like, yeah, in the days where I can't do things properly for like a week or maybe 2 weeks, I kind of try to take a break and, I'll like dial back on content, all these kinds of things. If I was at work, I would try to maybe talk to my boss and like dial back on certain tasks. Obviously, this is not relatable for everyone, but in general, it just means that when you're at your breaking point, to take more time to rest. And that's basically the best tip that I've learned in the past couple months. And the next thing I wanted to talk about was really finding passion in your life and in work, which is something that I cannot stress enough, because for most of my life, I never had a passion. I never had anything that I loved to do. I never really played a sport that I loved. I kind of did all these sports and things in high school just to get into college. I didn't have like an activity that I loved. I didn't really join any clubs in high school. I only joined clubs in college just to make friends and stuff. So I never had a singular passion that I loved in my life. And for some people, I think they can find this passion through strict alignment at work. I have one of these friends who he's big on environmental conservation, and he joined a startup that was working in environmental, conservation. And I thought that was great. Perfect alignment of his goals in work and in life. But for other people, I think work is just a job. And that's where we can start to lose meaning in our own lives. When we work every single day at a job where, we don't really care that much about it. We don't care really that much about the meaning or the mission. We're just there to get paid. And I think that's when over time, our own sanity starts to erode because we're not doing anything we love over time. So for me, the thing I loved was basically filmmaking and editing and creating content and stuff like that. So that's my passion project. That's the thing that I'm always working towards, no matter what job I'm in. And I think if you're stuck in a position where you feel like you don't have this passion or you're trying to find one, you need to find your own unique goal in life that you want to work towards. Finding my passion was probably one of the most important things I did in my life. And hopefully it can be for you too. The last quick thing I want to talk about was, if you feel lost in your career or in life, I really recommend you read the book, The Pathless Path. I read this book in probably May or April of 2023. This was right at like the peak of my software burnout cycle. And it was probably the most impacting book I had ever read in my entire life. It's basically about this guy, Paul Millard, going through his own experiences where he was working an extremely high-paying investment banking job, but he just lost the meaning for it. And he had like this huge health crisis. And at the end of the health crisis, he realized that, what am I doing with my life? Like working at a job he hates in New York and stuff. And basically he quit his job and he went on this pathless path, this journey to really just figure things out for himself. And he goes through a lot of his own struggles, like being okay with making less money. He goes through his own struggles of, dealing with people who just don't understand his path, people who thought that he was crazy, people who thought that he didn't know what he was doing, people who thought that he was going to become some sort of like insane person, whatever, like living in the woods or something. He talks about all that stuff. And I cannot stress enough like how big of an impact that had in my life. And the last thing I promised I would circle back to from the beginning of the video was this concept of feeling your feelings, or like listening to your feelings, even if you think they're invalid. The big asterisk to this is that sometimes, especially when we're younger and more immature, our feelings truly are like a little bit, there are times where you can be unreasonable, basically. And, there are a lot of times when you're going to be unreasonable. And a big part of the growing process is recognizing those things and growing as a person past those. I had so many experiences earlier in my life where I was just being unreasonable. I probably have a lot of these right now too. The biggest example I could give was after I got my first software job. I grinded for months and months to get that software job. I had all these thoughts when I was looking for the software job where it was like, please just give me a job. Once I get there, I will work as hard as I possibly can to make it worth your while, to make it so that hiring me wasn't a mistake. But then once I got to that software job, yeah, like I kept that mindset up for a couple months. And then I kind of like reverted back to the person I was before I got that job, which kind of just confirmed this whole thing that I didn't really deserve it in the first place. You know, I was working at this one company and I wanted to work on web technologies like React, JavaScript, stuff like that. But instead I was put on this Windows installer code, which was kind of, you know, sketchy to work on. Not sketchy. It was just like, it was just difficult to work on. There's a very little documentation. It kind of sucks and stuff like that. But I think that whole time I was just, you know, my mood started to get worse and I would always be like, fuck, like, why am I on this fucking project? I just want to work on web development. Why won't they put me on web development? I just want to work on this. That's a situation where, you know, looking back, what I really needed was like a big slap on the face. Like, bro, you barely got this job. You have nothing to fucking complain about. Do this shit, and in the future, you can worry about what you really want to do. So there are times where our feelings are leading us astray, and there are times where our feelings are valid and things that we really have to deal with. And only you yourself can figure out, you know, what those balances are. Sometimes it really helps if you have really good friends that will tell you when you're being unreasonable. And for me, I had to really get most of this through self-reflection. Not because I didn't have really good friends, but because finding someone who will look you in the eyes and tell you that you're being fucking stupid is really, really rare. So instead, I opted for just heavy self-reflection. I'm always like thinking about the things I do, the things I say, the things I am, or how I am in general. And yeah, you have to figure that out for yourself and find that balance between, you know, the wall and stuff like that. Anyways, this was a long ramble about random stuff, and I hoped it provided value and help to someone out there. And please, if you feel like, you know, you're in a rough place, you're in a rut in your career and you don't know what to do, feel free to reach out to me on Discord, feel free to DM me on Instagram, and I will try my best to respond to like everything with whatever advice I can give. And as always, thanks for watching.